oftentimes we present things as an either or situation when we could simply say both and. I will see this happen all the time where people are saying, well, should I send an email to my list or should I put it out on social media? Why are you putting an or there? You should do both. Welcome to the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast, where being a badass has less to do with what you wear and what music you listen to, and everything to do with whether you've got the thriving online business of your dreams. I'm your renegade thinking Harvard Law grad turned online entrepreneur host, Bobby Klink. In my years building my thriving business, the most important lesson I've learned is that being a badass online marketer isn't about secret strategies or ninja tactics. It's about doing the basic stuff right and showing the F up. So each week here on the show, you'll get clear, easy to execute guidance on how to build your online business and a swift kick in the ass or two to make sure you're getting it done. Hey there. Welcome to episode 160 of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klink, and I'm excited for today's episode. I'm excited because this is the kind of episode that really kind of gets me going. We're not going to be talking about a tactic. We're not going to be talking about a strategy. I'm going to be talking about a shift in your mindset, a shift in the way you're thinking that you need to make as an entrepreneur if you want to be successful. But really what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be challenging you. I'm going to be challenging you to ask yourself a really important question. I'm going to ask you to ask yourself whether you're asking the right questions in your life and in your business. And that may seem kind of weird. It may be kind of like you're thinking, what are you talking about? What questions, Bobby? Well, a couple of things here. One, there's a chance that you're asking yourself questions all the time, but actually, the bigger problem is that sometimes you're not even asking the question. You're assuming away the question that really could move your business, move your life, move something forward in a significant way if you actually took the time to ask the question. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. Now, this is an episode that really is inspired by one of the most important lessons I've learned from my coach, James Wedmore, over the last year and a half to 2 years. He has this thing that he says, it's not his quote, but what he says constantly is that the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask. And so that has a pretty important implication. That we all need to be working to ask better questions on a regular basis if we want to up-level our lives, our businesses, everything we do. And so that's what inspired this episode. And I'm going to be talking about those things. And I'm going to give you some suggestions on some questions that you need to think about reframing. And sometimes that maybe you need to be asking questions that you aren't normally asking. But before we dive in, now I would love for you to get to know my coach, James Wedmore, a bit more. He has changed my life in fundamental ways, changed my business in fundamental ways. And he has a video series coming out that will be released on June 15th called The Rise of the Digital CEO. It's an amazing series. It's kind of funny because, he's kind of a funny guy, but it's also in some sense a crash course on what every entrepreneur needs to be thinking, how they need to kind of shift the way that they're approaching the business that they're building online. It's packed with value, it's fun, and all of those things. And I know that a lot of people are anxious to get started and anxious for the video series to drop. I am too. In the meantime, my team and I have actually created a resource page where you can get to know some of the most important lessons that I've learned from James. And I've paid him a lot because I've been in his mastermind 2 years now, and that is not a cheap thing to do. So I would love for you to head over to my resource page that I've put together about some of James's best resources. You can head over to bobbyklink.com/BBD. It's BBD because this program is business by design. Again, bobbyklink.com/BBD. When you go over there, there's a video where I talk about the 5 most important lessons I've learned from James. And then there's episodes of his podcast, links to it that you can check out to really kind of go deeper. And maybe you can learn those same lessons from him without having to pay the kind of money I have. So head over to bobbyklink.com/BBD to get access to all of those resources. Now, with that, let's dive in. Now, there's a few different things that I want to talk about. And I want to talk about, in some sense, questions that we aren't asking. That's where I'm going to start, because I think there's a lot of times where we simply assume away or assume the answer to a question. And some of these you may be like, wait, what? That doesn't sound like a question, but I'm going to talk about it. The first thing I want to talk about is when we find ourselves saying, well, I can either do this or I can do that. Which one should I do? We're presenting an either or situation. We're suggesting to ourselves and to the people we're asking the question to that there are 2 options and only 2 options, and that we can only do one of those 2 options. And you'll hear this when you get used to kind of looking for this question. You'll have it happen all the time. You'll discover that we are programmed to think that we have 2 choices. And I'm going to give you a very clear example of this. At one point, I was in the middle, or I was coming up on a big kind of launch of some sort in my business. And I had someone on my team that I felt like this person wasn't working out. This is a person who was responsible for my social media. And so I went to James, I went to my mastermind group, and I presented, I said, look, I've got 2 choices. Either I keep this person on until we get through this launch, or I let this person go, and that means I have to handle all of the social media myself during this launch. And you can see how when I asked the question that way, I mean, it was kind of a no-win situation. I was looking at this world of, well, I can keep this person on, but I'm not really excited about that. But there's no way that I should be handling all of the social media, all of those aspects during this very busy period. And I asked the question that way, and James, I don't even remember what he said, but in his very typical James way, he said, why are you assuming that those are the only 2 options? He was challenging me to suggest that maybe there was a 3rd, a 4th, a 5th, a 6th, a 7th way. He was challenging me to stop viewing things from an either or perspective. In that case, what I needed to recognize was that there was more than simply 2 options. And I, in fact, found a 3rd option. I found someone else who was able to step in, handle the social media for me during the launch, and do a very good job. And that was only possible when James and my mastermind group helped me to reframe that question. So what I want you to think is when you find yourself saying, I can do this or I can do that, and especially in the context where it's kind of like neither one seems like a good solution, I'm going to challenge you to truly ask yourself, are those the only 2 options? Because most times they aren't. Most times there's a 3rd option, there's a 4th option. There is a way that you could go that gets you out of this. And see, the problem is we tend to put ourselves in the situation where we want to say, oh, woe is me. And we're not doing it consciously, but we want to use this as an excuse. And again, in reality, what was happening there in that situation, let me be very clear, is that my intuition was telling me that this team member should not be part of my team. But I was coming up with an excuse for why I should not actually cut ties. And the excuse I came up with at that moment was, oh, but I have this launch. And if I let this person go, I've got to do it all myself. That's an even worse option. So we clearly don't want that. And I present this to you so that you understand that that's normally when we present an either or, and that's a problem. What's happening is we're basically coming up with an excuse to not do what we really should be doing. So look for the third option. That's not a bad option. Most times it is there. Now, another way, though, that this either or question and paradigm in this kind of situation can come up and rear its head, or that we need to solve it, is we act like if we choose one, we can't do the other. Oftentimes, we present things as an either or situation when we could simply say both and. I will see this happen all the time where people are saying, well, should I send an email to my list or should I put it out on social media? Why are you putting an or there? You should do both. And I want to suggest to you that oftentimes we're kind of presenting these things and presenting it like we have a dilemma, like when we have two good things, that we're saying we have these two good things and I don't know how to choose between these two good options. Now, sometimes you're going to have to make choices. I want to be clear on that. But oftentimes we're presenting a false dilemma because it is not either A or B. It can be both A and B. So you can see how this is kind of the opposite of the first either or. The first either or, we're presenting kind of, a Hobson's choice where both options are bad. And so we're using it as an excuse not to take action. And in that case, you need to look for the third option and find the third option that is not bad. Now, on the other side, we will present an either or, and we get fixated and we don't know what to do. And we sit around and we don't make decisions because we got both of these good options and I can't figure out which one to do. We'll do both of them. It's not a choice. Don't feel like you have to make a choice there. Actually do both. So that's kind of the first series of questions. What I want you to do is when you find yourself saying, I have to do A or B, you should immediately say, wait a minute, do I really have to? Could I do both if it's good things? Or is there a third option if it's a bad thing? That one shift, asking that question in a better way and reframing it, not as an either or, will make a huge difference in your business and your life. So that's the first question. Now, a related question that I want you to think about is when you're simply not asking yourself a question. But when you find yourself futzing around and piddling around and not taking action, when you are resisting moving forward, when you're resisting continuing on with something or taking that first step and actually getting going, I want you to ask yourself why. Why are you spending all this time futzing around with your website? Why are you spending all of this time like messing around in Canva? Why are you spending all of this time interviewing 557 people before you hire someone? Why are you coming up with an excuse after excuse after excuse? And maybe you don't see them as excuses, but call them reasons why you can't. When you find that happening and you resist taking action, that should be a sign that there is something deeper going on. And I'll give you a couple of examples of this. In my personal case, the biggest place where this came up was with hiring in the first place. Now, people who know me know that I am a fire, ready, aim kind of guy. I'm the kind of guy that normally it's like, boom, I take action. I don't think, I don't stop. I go too fast. I give my team whiplash now. And I've always been like that with pulling the trigger on ideas, trying new things, all of this. It's never been a problem. Like, I'm not someone who doesn't act. I'm not someone who lets perfection stop me from taking action. And yet, all of last year, like the beginning of last year, I knew that I needed to start building my team. Literally, I went to the first mastermind retreat of the year in February of 2018, and of 2019, and I was talking about how I needed to build my team. June or July, I guess it would have been July rolls around, and we have our second mastermind retreat, and I still haven't hired anybody. And I still haven't taken action. I guess, no, it wasn't June last year. And I had come up with reasons, I guess. I had done things, but I still hadn't hired anyone. And that should have been a clear sign to me that there was something deeper going on. There was a deeper reason why I was not moving forward, why I was not taking action. And it wasn't all of the different reasons I was coming up with, like, oh, all of a sudden I had law firm work, or there was this, or there was that, or there was always a reason, but none of those reasons were real. The reality is that the reason had nothing to do with all of the different reasons I was telling myself, all of the things I said I had to have in place and I had to do and needed to be ready before I could hire, all of that. And again, it was a simple question from my mastermind friends and from James and from watching this that helped me reframe it. The reason was that I had some mental BS going on in my mind from two people that I had hired during my law firm days where I had to let them go. The first was a virtual assistant. I had literally hired a Filipino virtual assistant. I don't even remember how long ago, like 3.5 years ago, before I was ready to do so. And I didn't know what to task her with. And I was thinking I had to give her tasks and be a task manager and all this. So ultimately, I ended up hiring this woman and keeping her on for, 4 or 5 months and had her doing busy work because I didn't know what to do. And so I let her go eventually. Now, on the other hand, I had hired an associate at my law firm, a lawyer who had come in, and she was great. She did great work. I enjoyed having her on. But when I made the decision to pivot my business to the online business and stopped marketing the law firm business, I didn't have business coming in. I didn't have work. I had to let her go. Not because she had done anything wrong, not because she had not been a great employee, but because she hadn't. And I will never forget that conversation. It was one of the most painful I ever had. Because letting this woman go when she had done nothing wrong was a problem. And so what I realized last June, through these questions and through reframing why was I waiting, was that I was actually avoiding hiring because I was afraid of having to have that conversation again. I was afraid of what happens if I have to look someone in the eye again and tell them I have to let them go. And that was a realization. Now, I worked through it by recognizing, again, and this is a subtle point here of even asking a better question there, because in my mind, in the back of my mind, I was just fixating on that pain at the end. And I wasn't thinking about what about the 2 years before, the 2 or so years that the woman had worked for me. And James simply asked me that question. Was it good for me to have her as an employee for 2 years? I said, yes. He said, do you think it was good for her career? Do you think she appreciated working for you for those 2 years? I said, no doubt. She sent me a note thanking me after the fact. And, 2 jobs later reached out to me to say that I had been the best boss she had ever had. And she appreciated me. See, I was thinking about the end and not asking those more important questions of, was it good for my business? Was it good for me? And was it good for her to have worked for me, even if only for those 2 years? And reframing and asking that question got the block out of my head. And then just so you know, I then, hired someone within weeks of that shift. That person didn't work out. And I had to let her go, not because of no fault of her own. It was just not a good fit. And so whatever, we had to part ways. But because I had shifted my mindset, that didn't scar me. And literally within like a week or two of parting ways with that employee is when Katie, who is now my integrator, I brought her on at the time as a contractor. But that was only possible because I shifted the questions I was asking myself, because I shifted my mindset, because I asked the question, well, what about the period while the person was working for me? And ironically, that actually is an important way to frame things, and an important kind of question to ask that has serious implications for the fact that I was willing to hire Katie and bring her in as my number two. And now I can't imagine having a business without her. You see, she had a business of her own. And so when I, had her as a contractor, it was one thing, but I brought her on as an employee January 1st of this year, 2020. A lot of people wouldn't have done that because they would have been afraid, well, what if she wants to go out and build her business again? What if she leaves after a year? But I looked at it and said, well, I have no doubt that from what she had done for me as a contractor, that she would actually help me, that it would be useful to have her as an employee, even if only for 6 months. And so because of that, I was willing to shift the way I thought. I was willing to shift what I thought about her as an employee. And it was all because I was willing to do the work to ask myself, why was I actually resisting hiring in the first place? So again, the quality of my life and the quality of my business was determined by the quality of the question I asked myself. That's an important thing to bring home. Now, the next thing I want to ask you is to really think through a question that many times we don't ask ourselves, but we should. We need to be asking ourselves, what do we actually want? Not what does someone tell us we want? Not what do we need? Not how do I build this, or how do I get a following on that, or how do I sell with a webinar? No, what do you want? Because you need to determine what kind of business you want to have. Until you know that, you really can't make a lot of progress. There's a lot of things that we think about and we take for granted, but I'm guessing that unless you're really weird, you didn't get into business, you didn't start the business you have, whatever it is, so that you could spend a bunch of time doing customer support. I'm guessing you didn't, start the business you have today so that you could spend all your time futzing around inside, your page builder, whether it's Kajabi or Kartra or WordPress or Squarespace. I'm betting that's not why you started your business. I'm betting you didn't start your business so you could spend a bunch of time in Canva messing around with that. But a lot of entrepreneurs, that's what their business becomes. Because when we start our business, yes, we as I talked about in last week's episode, we're doing all the things. And so I'm going to continue to encourage you to make the decision of what do you want in your business? Do you want to be doing those things? Do you want to have a small business that doesn't have a huge impact so that you can just keep it small? If so, that's great, and that is fine. But you need to start from the perspective of figuring out what you want your business to look like, what you want to be doing, what you want to be offering, how you want to be spending your time, both in the business and out of the business. And those should become your North Star. Those should become the things that guide the decisions you're making. Because a lot of us forget those things. A lot of us forget about that. And so we lose what we really started the business for. And that costs us because ultimately then we end up not doing the work we really want to do. And that's a bummer, man. I'm just going to be honest with you. I mean, I remember being in the hustle. I remember doing all that stuff. And at the time, you don't think about it. You don't realize it. You just have your head down. You're just working. But the problem is that you're not working in a way that makes sense for your business, for your life, and for what you want. And so you may end up building a business you don't want to run. Now, one of the members of my group coaching program had this realization that she had built a business she did not want to run. Luckily, through that group coaching, she was able to kind of make a shift and say, okay, well, you guys are helping me. And she is now shifted and is now running the business she wants, doing what she wants to do. And the funny thing is, she has shifted away from a one-to-many to a service model because that's what she wants. The problem, though, is you're going to hear a lot of people talking about how, no, you need to get out of one-to-one. You need to do one-to-many because that's the only way to scale. That's the only way to make money. So, stop. You don't want to be a service provider. And so you may hear that, and that might push you towards that in spite of the fact that that's not what you want. Now, it could be in small ways and big ways. Like for me, one of the things that I know that I do want is to interact with my people, to connect with my people, to spend time in my Facebook group. And it's funny, there's nothing right or wrong about that, but I know a lot of entrepreneurs who basically say that's not what they want. They don't like doing that. They want to get off of social media, so they don't spend time in social media. And that's fine. But if I listen to all those people who were saying, oh, no, that's not a good use of your time, you should not be doing that, I wouldn't have the business that I want. I wouldn't have the business of my dreams. I wouldn't get to say that I'm playing with friends every day, which is what I feel like I'm doing. So I simply tell you that you need to constantly be asking yourself the question, what do you actually want? What kind of business do you want? What kind of interaction with your customers do you want? What kind of team do you want? Do you want a small team, no team, a big team to have maximum impact? Do you want a team that does everything so you simply show up and do the content and are the face? You have to figure out for yourself what you want. And if you're not asking yourself that question every single day, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. I check in on that all the time. And I check in on that now with my team. What do they want? What is their vision for their role? What is their vision for their future? What will make them feel like they are living the job, the life of their dreams? That is an important question that you're probably not asking. And if you're not, I encourage you to start asking it. Now, the last question I want to talk about, or the last thing I want to talk about improving the questions you ask, is a little bit different. This is about a place where you are asking yourself questions, but you're not asking the right questions. And it's not a single question you're asking, but you'll hear it all the time. When people are asking strategy questions and tactic questions, oftentimes, not oftentimes, I would say 90% of the time or 95% of the time, they're asking the wrong question because they're not starting with the end in mind. And an example I want to give you of this is I had this person recently. I was in this experience, a woman who has an evergreen funnel and has had an evergreen funnel going forever and is not doing anything if someone doesn't buy on the evergreen webinar right up front. So kind of after that, just nothing happens. And the person, she was asking this question about how to segment a list and how to do some things, make some different offers and something like that. And that's not the right question. The right question is, well, what do you really want to get out of this? What are you really trying to get? Why are you asking this question about this tactic? Why are you asking about segmenting or doing these things? And you've got to figure out the answer there. Now, in that case, the answer was, well, I've got all these people that are coming into my list and I'm not doing anything with them. I'd like to make some more money. There we go. Now, maybe the question is, how can we make more money from the people who are coming into my world through this evergreen funnel? And it might have nothing to do with segmenting. And I've told the story of my own situation last February at the first mastermind when I was joining James's mastermind at the beginning. And I went to do a recap of my launch. to do this discussion of my webinar launch of the template library. And the question I asked was, how can I optimize this webinar funnel? What should I be focused on in here? Should I focus on changing the webinar slightly? Should I focus on different ads? Should I focus on the show up sequence? Where should I go? And so that's what I thought my question should be. And that's the question I asked. But James and the members of the mastermind helped me see, no, that's not the right question. The right question wasn't how to optimize a webinar funnel. The right question was, how do I sell the template library and make more money? It might be that it's about not doing a webinar. It might be that it's about doing something different. It might be that it's about something completely off the wall. And shifting that question, shifting my mindset from how do I improve this webinar funnel to how do I sell the template library the best way possible without putting a lot of stress on myself and the most profitable way possible is what led me to my non-launch launch strategy, which is what let me simply send emails over 6 to 7 days and make 50 grand. No Facebook ads, no costs involved, nothing. No stress, no mess, 50 grand in the bank. And I did that multiple times last year. And so I present that so you understand that I was fixated on the particular strategy that I had already picked without asking the question, was that the right strategy? And it was only when I reframed the question as, how do I make money the easiest way, the least painful way, etc., on this product, and stopped assuming that a webinar or that a launch vehicle was the way to do it. It was only when I made that shift that I was able to actually get the result I wanted. And so I give you that example so that you can start to see that in everything we do, we're making these assumptions about what we should be doing. And so, for example, rather than saying, well, how do I optimize my Instagram? Maybe ask yourself, should I spend any time worrying about my Instagram? And I pick that simply as an example. I'm not picking on Instagram. It could be Facebook for you. It could be Pinterest. It could be Twitter. It could be all this. And again, I see these things, like I see people asking these questions like, oh, nowadays TikTok is the big thing. Well, how do I get followers on TikTok? Well, let me ask you a question before that. Should you be trying to get followers on TikTok? Now, if you haven't been able to get followers on Facebook or Instagram or any of the other social media platforms, and that hasn't worked for you, do you really think that the problem is just that you need to go to a new platform? Sorry, not sorry, but that's not the problem. The problem wasn't the platform you were on. And so again, I present that so that you can see how people chase strategies, chase tactics without asking the fundamental question about whether they should be employing that strategy or that tactic or doing something different entirely. And the only way that you get to that right place is if you start asking yourself the question of, what is my ultimate goal? And then start from that goal. And if your ultimate goal, for example, is, well, I want to generate $50,000 in revenue. Well, let's not fixate on anything. Let's say, okay, what's the quickest, easiest, lightest way to get you to $50,000 in revenue? It could be making a high ticket offer. It could be sending some emails. It could be a million different things. But it's only when you get out and step back from the assumption that you have to use a specific strategy or a specific tactic that you're able to actually look at it and find the right answer. Now, it could be that you happen to have lucked into the right answer or the right strategy, and you do just need to optimize it. But I'm going to suggest to you that more times than not, that is not the reality. More times than not, people are just picked a strategy because someone told them to, and now they feel locked into that strategy and can't step back and make a wiser decision. Now, I don't want you to use this as an excuse to bounce from strategy to strategy to strategy, because that is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying simply is that you should always be starting from the perspective of what is my goal? What is the purpose? Where do I want to be once this is done? And then find the strategy, find the tactic, find the answer based upon that. Don't start with a strategy and put a goal there. So that's the shift, the last shift I want to talk about. But ultimately, what you need to be doing is asking yourself these deeper questions. What do you want? Why are you finding yourself limited? Instead of asking, are there other possibilities? When you start opening your eyes and asking yourself about whether there are other possibilities and coming from the perspective that there are all kinds of possibilities out there, your life and your business will be transformed. So I encourage you to start asking those questions. That's it. I'm going to stop now. But my call to action to you today is start to ask yourself questions and start to recognize the questions that are implied. And when you've already simply assumed the answer to a question, and when you should actually step back and say, wait, is that assumption, is that thing that I'm taking as baked in valid? Or should I step back and ask myself that question? Do that on a regular basis, and your business will be way better off for it. That's it for today. I will see you on the next episode of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. That's it for this episode of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. Make sure to tune in next time. And in the meantime, go out and build the badass business of your dreams.